Hello and welcome to or back to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at a crossover that no one asked for, which is Elliott Hulse, strongman turned red pillar, interviewing YogiOabs. I'm not really sure how to describe YogiOabs. He has a lot of interesting ideas. And the main thing I remember about him is that his Twitter bio stated he taught women how to behave. And now he's banned from Twitter. Anyway, the end result of this interview was a video titled Men Want Virgins for Wives. Of course, they covered a bit more than that topic, which is why their interview, when I whittled it down, was 30 minutes long. But I will say that if you're like 20 or 25, especially if you're a virgin yourself, I can totally understand, wanting a virgin. Sounds really weird. But the older you get, the more unlikely it becomes, provided, you stay in your appropriate age range. And if you're like 40 looking for a virgin wife, I have some questions about that. And on that note, I also wish to note that the man on the right, Elliott, is married with 3 or 4 kids. And the man on the left, YogiOabs, is apparently engaged. And on that note, please let me know in the comments if you would like me to do a video on YogiOabs. I think I could probably do a video about him. Anyway, that being said, let's take a moment to appreciate Ellie, who is just sleeping back there. And while my hair dries, let's just go ahead and get into the video.
YogiOabs, one of the things that I see you do, which I think is really fascinating, is that you teach, according to your website, traditional, timeless, patriarchal marriage tips.
Hold up. How can you teach patriarchal marriage tips, or marriage tips in general, when you've never been married?
What is that anyway, and why is that important? Traditional and patriarchal marriage in an age where nobody even wants to get married anymore. Why is what you have to say important?
Oh, this is so funny. A coworker and I were just talking about this literally yesterday because she's getting married next year, and there's forecast to be 1 or 2 million weddings next year. But yeah, sure, no one wants to get married anymore.
Because about you and I was probably 20. I'm actually 30 now, so. It's first of all amazing to be speaking with you. So I really appreciate this. And it's fascinating that whenever someone is interested in my content, I know where they are aligned spiritually. And it's not too many people today, although I'm seeing a resurgence. So I know where you're standing spiritually. And that's the first thing that I think is really important for everyone to realize, is that this is a spiritual discussion, even though it might seem like facts and logic here and there. A lot of these things are working spiritually. So to answer your question, what's the point of relationship advice if you're not aiming for marriage? Most relationships fail. The divorce rate's 50%, but what about the breakup rate of relationships? It's probably 95%.
You know what I really love most about doing these videos? Is that the people that I'm responding, commenting, whatever on, never post sources. They say, I guess, and their community just takes it. They don't push back. They don't ask for a source. They're just seems legit, and they let it go. But yeah, I need a source for 95% of relationships break up. And also, there's a big difference between your relationship breaking up at 6 months versus 6 years. But anyway, back to the video. Oh, also, please excuse YogiOabs' technical difficulties. He's going to have a fair amount of them in this video. I tried to edit them out as best I could, but sometimes to try and get what he's saying, they just had to be left in.
So we should all really be aiming for marriage. And the reason for that is, in my mind, supported by so much literature, but also just how we feel. We don't crave meaningless hookups with people. We really crave intimacy. That's what people want. If they didn't want that, why would they choose to live together for 10 years and not tie the knot, even have kids together? We're craving intimacy, but we're so afraid of the consequences, the legal consequences of what's called marriage today, what's left of the institution of marriage in the USA.
So there are important legal benefits that you can get from being married, like being able to visit your spouse in the hospital. But I have a feeling that since YogiOabs is so Christian, his main reason for pushing marriage is because he wants people to have sex while married and not when they're not married.
So why do I call it timeless and patriarchal? The fundamental belief is that we are created a certain way and human nature does not change. Human nature does not change. So when we look at human behavior, we see things that fundamentally remain the same. And so living as a healthy, normal male in 2021 I find just my mere existence, just taking a breath, walking down the street, is literally at odds with what society is saying about me, the way I'm carrying myself, the way I look.
I'm sorry, did he just say that taking a breath while walking down the street is at odds with how society portrays men? What? You have to breathe. that fundamental fact of human nature has not changed. He is at least right about that much. So what? Is it unmanly to breathe while walking? This is a really weird thing.
And so that indicates to me that it's society that is not timeless anymore. It's not based in the truth. Because what is timeless is truth. What is cultural shifts and changes, but what is timeless is something that has to do with who we are at our core. And when we wake up to who we are at our core, we really just live an amazing, more easy life. Of course, life should be hard. Life should have struggles.
Why?
But the types of struggles people are having today with their gender, with relationships, are struggles that come from not being in tune with this timeless nature that has to do with how we were designed.
So I hate to be the one to burst YogiOabs' bubble, but people have been struggling with sexuality, gender, relationships, pretty much everything since the beginning of time. Now, it wasn't considered, appropriate to discuss that ages ago, so it might seem like it's a new thing as it's more open now, but it's actually not. It's always been around. And telling people to just, suck it up and go be a manly man or a girly girl is actually just pushing those problems beneath the surface, which I guess is great for YogiOabs because then he doesn't have to think about it or deal with it at all. But not so great for those people because they're still going to be struggling, but even more because it has to be a secret.
So if it's timeless, where are we today in that time frame?
We are, I'd love to say we're at those end times, right?
The delight and eagerness which some Christians look forward to the end times just really baffles me. I mean, I know that they want to be reunited with God, but on the other side, it seems to me that if God gave you life on this earth, it's rather disrespectful to wish, to get rid of it as soon as possible so you can, go to heaven.
So the thing is, history does repeat itself. In communist Russia, feminism was a tool to make people more equal. And the feminists today, a lot of the leftists, they even look towards countries like Cuba and they say, oh, this is an equal society. Some feminist said that just the other day. She said Cuba is the most equal society in the world.
Source, please. I also really love how he says some feminists. We're all part of the Borg. Though on that note, I did my own research, as they say, and in a 2019 podcast with Ezra Klein of Vox and the New York Times, Nicole Hannah-Jones was asked whether there were candidates or places that she thought had a viable and sufficiently ambitious integration agenda. Hannah-Jones responded that while she is not an expert on race relations internationally, she believed the most equal and multiracial country in the Western Hemisphere is Cuba, which she attributed to socialism. The most equal multiracial country in our hemisphere, it would be Cuba, Hannah-Jones said, as reported by the publication. Cuba has the least inequality between black and white people any place really in the hemisphere. I mean, the Caribbean, most of the Caribbean, it's hard to count because the white population in a lot of those countries is very, very small. A lot of those countries are run by black folks. But in places that are truly at least biracial countries, Cuba actually has the least inequality. And that's largely due to socialism, which I'm sure no one wants to hear. So for one, I want to know why this interview from 2019 is being brought up in 2021. And is it just me, or so the interview was about race relations, and I have a feeling that YogiOabs saw that, did she even identify as a feminist? Saw that a woman was speaking about it, so he assumed the equality she was talking about was between men and women, but it was about race relations.
So gender equality is something that has happened in the past. We've seen it in the past, and it hasn't been a good thing.
So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say he did not actually read the article and just assumed it was a woman talking about gender equality instead of racial. Anyway, so please tell me when exactly we've had gender equality and why it was a bad thing. Please explain to me why it's a bad thing for women to get to choose how to live their lives instead of being told, well, you're a woman, therefore you get married and you have kids and you stay home.
So as far as where we are as based on the time it's just not good. That's all I can say.
Why is gender equality not a good thing?
Gender equality is a bad thing because when people think of gender equality, they think that it means men and women should be exactly the same.
Tell me you don't know what gender equality is without saying you don't know what gender equality is. It's not saying that men and women are the same. People cannot be the same. Everyone is different. Every woman is different. Every man is different. everyone is different. Even if you have a characteristic in common, like being a woman, you will still be different from other people that share that same characteristic. It's just saying that a woman should not be denied opportunities because she's a woman, and a man should not be denied opportunities because he's a man. For example, a man shouldn't be told he can't be a teacher or a stay-at-home dad because that's not what men do, and a woman shouldn't be told she can't be a CEO or president because that's not what women do. This is really not that difficult a concept to grasp, so I'm just going to go ahead and assume he's playing stupid and is not actually this dense.
On a physical level.
No, try again.
And some people might not believe that, but that is what we're dealing with today, where men are supposed to be pregnant.
People should only become pregnant if they so desire. No one should be supposed to get pregnant.
And a transgender female, which is can be on the cover of Sports Illustrated or with the Nevada Miss Nevada beauty pageant.
And your point is, also, as a devout Christian, should you even be looking at Sports Illustrated or watching beauty pageants?
And so gender equality as far as rights is definitely something that is a important argument to think about, is how should we construct society to benefit all beings? But as soon as we step into making men and women equal in ways that are against their design, we're going to run into catastrophic problems. And that's why women today are alcoholics. They're dying from alcoholic liver disease in their late 20s and 30s, which is pretty much unheard of.
So clearly, the solution to this problem is that men need to go to work to provide for their families and get married, and women need to get married, have kids, and stay home with them. And then no men will be committing suicide and no women will be dying of alcoholism. No. I really hate this, not even argument, but this statement, because it overlooks, for one, that Americans as a whole are becoming unhappier, and we can't just warp back to the 1950s, because even the 1950s was an anomaly. It was 10 years after a world war. Things were different back then, and we can't get that back. No matter how much other people think we cannot go back to 1955. And for that matter, look at the 1960s and 70s. That was a backlash to the 1950s and the molds people were told they had to fill to make them happy and to be a productive part of society. And that didn't work. People rebelled against it because it's just not natural to humans to live in such tight little boxes. What works for Susie will not work for Amy, and what works for Adam won't work for Michael. And on that end note, does he really not think of reasons why Americans as a whole might be becoming unhappier? Does he really not think of the wage stagnation increasing feelings of unhappiness? Does he really not think of climate change as increasing people's unhappiness? Does he really not feel the sense of impending doom people have from the utter lack of things we're doing to at least mitigate or lessen the impact of climate change? I mean, sometimes I kind of wish I lived in this world where the fix would just be so simple. Just, get married, have kids, everything will be fine.
They're on antidepressants. They're very sad because they're not living according to their design because of gender equality.
They're very sad. So gender equality doesn't forbid people from getting married. It does not forbid people from having kids, or for that matter, doing whatever it is that will bring you happiness and fulfillment. Gender equality just doesn't trap you in a box based on your sex. That is all.
I saw in one of your videos you used an interesting term, Inchils. I think it was. Now, I've heard the word incel before as it relates to men who they say were involuntarily celibate, right? And that's kind of seen as a derogatory term. What are these women that are incels, and why is that a problem?
Yeah, so it's inchill, involuntarily childless.
Oh.
And this isn't a term I even made up. It was something I was watching a TED Talk by, I think her name is Joy. She's a woman from the United Kingdom. I believe she's around 50 years old. And she gave a TED Talk about the grief she experienced after realizing that she was never going to have a kid in her life after years and years and years of trying. And that realization even led to her husband and her splitting up. And her main point in this talk was that it's super sad. And the term that she was using is the involuntarily childless. 1 in 5 women in the UK, and I think Ireland and probably the USA, reach the age of 60 without ever having a kid. And they're struggling to figure out what they should actually do with their time. So this isn't just something I made up to make fun of people, although I think young women need that pressure to understand that what they're being taught is wrong.
And what are these women being taught that's wrong? that we don't have to get married at 20 and begin having kids right away. I really love it when men think women don't know about our own fertility, so they have to warn us.
The reality is that we need to have sympathy for these individuals that have been completely conned by gender equality. So inchill just means involuntarily childless. I wrote a blog post about it, so I don't want to ramble about it, but the reality is that the people peddling this term, not peddling this term, using this term, fail to realize that a lot of these women are voluntarily childless because they chose to put their career first instead of family. They chose to freeze their eggs, and then the egg freezing technology just simply didn't work. So they chose feminism.
He does know that you cannot want to have kids in your 20s and not be a feminist, right? It also means that you can have kids in your 20s and be a feminist.
And then later they don't take accountability for those actions, and they say, I'm involuntarily childless. So it's not my favorite term, but I think it's so simple and sweet, and is a great rebuttal to incels.
I have two questions. How is it sweet, and how is it a rebuttal to incels? Didn't incels give themselves that name? And also, I like how he says twice that he didn't come up with Inchils, but whenever you look up Inchils, he's the only one talking about it. And also, he says on his own blog post that it's a term he came up with. But sure, YogiOabs, you didn't make it up.
What do you say to these people that are convinced that there's overpopulation on the planet and it's better not to have children?
I say that, first of all, it's been expected for decades that population might start to fluctuate around 12 billion. So we're not really, that's like a 50% increase, which is massive. So we're not really anywhere close to that. I can understand people in India or China or really crowded cities thinking that the world is overpopulated, but it's actually not overpopulated. So this, I don't know where it's came from, but the world is definitely not overpopulated. And Elon Musk actually gave a speech about it.
Can someone please tell me why we care at all what Elon Musk has to say about anything?
And he said that every person in the world could literally fit on the island of Manhattan. So even he suggested that the world is not overpopulated, and it's going to become underpopulated over the next several decades, which is going to have huge catastrophic economic consequences in all of Western Europe, all of the United States, and China, and India. These are the biggest economies in the world. So the world is like underpopulated. We should all be focusing on finding a life partner, getting married, and breeding.
First, humans are not livestock. We don't breed. Second, okay, we can all fit on Manhattan. What about our air quality? Do you want to live that close to people? Where's our food going to come from? And what kind of quality of life would we have if we're all stuck in Manhattan like little, pigs in cages?
I agree with you, totally 100%. I have 4 children. I come from a big family, and I promote the idea of marriage in the family. But there are a lot of arguments against it, and I'm curious what your thoughts are as it relates to those who say that human beings are like bonobos, and that that we're by nature promiscuous and polyamorous, and that marriage is an outdated institution. What do you have to say to that?
So if we are to behave like animals.
Well, he did just say we could all be squished into Manhattan and that we should breed, so.
Then society will descend into anarchy and chaos. So as human beings, as members of a greater society, compared to, say, members of a tribe that, dance around a fire, fight with other tribes, and that's pretty much their daily existence. That's what it's like in tribal communities in Africa. If you want to live in a society and have it be productive, there needs to be order, there needs to be rule. So we descend into chaos if we behave as animals. Now, that doesn't really answer your question, are we animals? And the evolutionists argue we're basically animals, but we're probably the only species capable of higher thinking and consciousness. So that's not something we see in other animals. So it really shows that we are different. But what about our sexuality? Bonobos, male bonobos have the biggest testicles out of all mammals. They breed like crazy. When the female bonobo is ovulating, she's getting inseminated by the entire tribe. Human beings aren't actually like that.
I find it so interesting he says that, because a few months ago I had a whole bunch of folks, mainly men, in my comments telling me, it's all biology. It all boils down to biology. Men do whatever and women monkey branch and want to marry the 20% of men or whatever. Although granted, that was MGTOW folk and not red pill. So I guess that's a little difference in their theology.
But what about gorillas? We're not like gorillas either. So men cheat, women cheat. So we're clearly not completely monogamous like gorillas. We're somewhere in the middle. Here's the thing. I think this is such an important question that unfortunately would take like 50 hours to really discuss, 50-hour Zoom call to answer. I think that when we believe that we are polyamorous, we start to become that, and we see examples of where it might work. Although I've never seen really an example of a polyamorous relationship work.
I just really don't think that YogiOabs' friend group is that diverse that he would have any polyamorous friends. And I also kind of doubt that even if he did see it work, he would just ignore it as like a one-off or whatever, rather than admit that maybe he doesn't have all the answers.
For women, because or men, but for women especially, they always become jealous.
Ah, yes. I'm sure YogiOabs has had many experiences with a variety of women, and that's why he can speak on this topic with authority, even though he's just reiterating a stereotype about jealous women.
There are some cases where polygamy works really well, and we do see that in the Bible, pointing to the fact that the male design can handle multiple wives, but we don't really see evidence that the female design can handle multiple husbands and that leads to a good outcome.
Now, wait a minute. Polyamory can't work because women get jealous, but polygamy can work? So a woman wouldn't get jealous of her husband's other wives?
For the children, for the family. So the nuclear family, even though people struggle sexually, I mean, like let's get real here. People struggle sexually with lust in their marriages. Even in happy marriages, people cheat. At least secularists do. I don't know too much about Christians, but it happens.
I like how it's either Christian or secular, but yes, YogiOabs, Christians also cheat.
So we need order and control in order to live our best life and have a successful relationship. So I don't know if we are 100% monogamous, and I definitely know we're not 100% polyamorous. But I do think that there is so much wiring in our brains to support monogamy, as far as when women are pure and untouched, pretty much the first man they meet, they basically fall in love with him, right? So
that's why men want virgin wives. It's easier for them. They don't have to work too hard to have someone fall in love with them.
that says something about monogamy.
No, honey, that says something about you.
And men who also don't sleep around a lot, they fall in love quicker. So it does show that we are meant for this type of intimate pair bonding with one other person. But I can't prove if that's the case for everyone, or that's just how we're designed.
Well, what do you mean you can't prove it? Then where did this theory come from? Did you do a poll of your own audience? Because I can kind of see where that one might be, a little skewed in the favor of monogamy.
You mentioned that, even in the Bible, it says that men have the capacity to, have multiple partners or multiple wives. But today what we see is almost the opposite, where women are, from what I understand, cheat more than men and having more partners than men. I see a lot of young men that are, in their early 20s, and some of them have been virgins and some of them have been with a limited amount of partners, but the girls that they're dealing with have been with dozens and dozens of boys.
Source, please. Not that it really matters, because everyone is allowed to make choices. If a man wants to be a virgin, that's fine. If a woman wants to sleep around, also fine.
How does that affect marriage in the future by having women sleep around so much?
Well, that's a great question. I'm sure you know the answer to that. I mean, it definitely destroys it, because a man with 1 million sexual partners still wants a virgin as a wife.
Well, he can want whatever he wants, but would that virgin woman want a man who's had a million sexual partners?
But a woman with 1 million sexual doesn't, or 0 sexual partners, doesn't really have the preference for male virginity. So because the preference for female virginity is much stronger in men, I believe that when women have high sex partner counts, it really it demotivates men to get married. Even women with one boyfriend in the past, their husband will think about it for months and months and months until he gets over it. So
Men in the audience, please let me know if it haunted you for months knowing that your wife had a sexual past. And on that note, I will say that the older I get, the less it actually matters.
there's just something about it that we don't like. And something I've been grappling with is, what about Christianity? What if a woman says, I've had 1 million and 1,000 sexual partners, but now Jesus saved me, and Jesus wiped away all my sins? And yes, that's true. That is true. And I do think men should give a woman with 1 million and 10,000 sexual partners a chance. But we still have a preference, and I still think that the virgins in society should be celebrated, and that's how it was done in the past. Virgin wives were celebrated in the past.
And please do tell us what happened to the not virgin wives in the past.
So it really destroys marriage, whether men are sleeping around or women are sleeping around. It really destroys it, because the more soul ties you're creating with people, the harder it is to bond with someone in front of you. And what I see is people are just not finding genuine connections with people today, like people 2 generations ago, where they just fall in love with their friend, classmate, and be married for 50, 60, 70 years.
Well, yeah. Because people, for one, move around more, and two, we now have the internet, which means we are connected with people all around the world.
You mentioned that you are a fan of and you teach a practice called courting. What is courting and why is it important?
Yeah, so courtship is defined as getting to know someone that you're interested in it for marriage without doing premarital sex. So typically, that involves longer period of time, more months of dating, getting to know someone. You can still go on dates and coffee dates, but when you think of if I'm speaking to someone else who's a secularist, someone who's against Christianity, just someone living in a big city in America.
So there's no secular people in rural areas or small towns, and there's no religious folk in cities? So why are there a ton of churches around me then? Are they just like for decoration?
Dating can mean hooking up, and that's not allowed in courtship. That's really not a part of the courtship model. Of course, people fail in the courtship model. They sleep with that person too, and they might still get married. They might not get married. So courtship, what does it do? Why is courtship so amazing? When you delay the potential gratification of intimacy, you are forced to understand this individual, this potential partner, on an emotional and spiritual level. And I will repeat that, you are forced to get to know them on that level.
Right.
When you are riding the highs, surfing those highs of oxytocin and dopamine after having sex with this potential partner, your mind's not thinking like that anymore. Your mind's just not there anymore. You're not going to notice some of these other variables that really matter in a relationship, the serious stuff, the boring stuff, the hard stuff. And so these type of people fail at such high rates whenever things get hard in a relationship. So another benefit of courtship is really that you talk about the harder stuff, because marriage is not supposed to be a fairy tale. It shouldn't be marketed as a fairy tale. It should be marketed as something that involves a lot of challenges, but when you overcome them, you become a better person and you do end up with a happy family. So yeah, courtship is what I believe we all need to be, people who are single all need to be going back to the courtship model and not have sex until they're married.
So in theory, I have no problem with courtship. I see nothing wrong with waiting to have sex, whether you're waiting for a specific moment or until marriage, though I wouldn't really advise waiting for marriage. Although if that's what you're most comfortable with, you do you. But I do think it's silly to act as though it's either hooking up or courtship. There are many, many ways to date, and you should choose the method that works best for you. And if you want to date someone who's like, I believe in having sex on like the third date, and you're like, well, I'm not comfortable with that, and they're like, oh, well then see ya. Just let them go. Don't chase after them and compromise your values. But at the same time, if you both, our third date is totally great, yeah, let's have sex, that is also totally fine. I find it so weird because I'd be willing to bet that YogiOabs would consider himself, Republican, conservative, freedom, yay. But he thinks that we should all be doing the same things that he does, which is just like totally the opposite of freedom.
But in our culture that glorifies fornication and promiscuity to such a great degree that, even the youngest of children are now exposed to this particular type of lifestyle, what do you say to someone that has a traditional bent, someone who wants the purity of courtship and marriage, trying to find a mate in this day and age?
Yeah, so that's such a good question. Firstly, find someone who is Christian, because a Christian man or Christian woman who is strong in their faith, right? So when I first was learning about Christianity, I thought all Christians were kind of the same way and they all, acted the same. But a lot of Christians today, most Christians today really are completely failing and are no different than modern people. It's actually better to court an atheist woman that is teachable than a Christian woman that is stubborn and extremely modern. So don't just go by that, but definitely be open to people that are Christian. It's really about delaying gratification. So you have to, first of all, understand as a man that you're responsible for leading this woman. So if you're sexually immoral, if you're really touchy and feely and don't really have a standard set for yourself, it's not really going to work out for you. So you have to, first of all, fix that part of you that is itching for premarital sex, itching for whatever it is that's causing you to want that.
You heard it here, folks. Hand-holding leads to fornication.
And then when you're speaking to someone, if they're acting like that, you can educate them and share your opinions on why, you're interested in marriage and you feel like relationships today are so shallow. And look, I used to do things that way, but I really want to get to know someone more now on an emotional and spiritual level. And I can guarantee you so many people are just going to nod their heads and agree that, yeah, relationships are shallow. I'm having a hard time. So really just make the choice and choose it. And, it's not that hard to give up sex. I've been celibate for over 3 years now.
Wow.
Is Elliott wowing over the idea of being celibate for 3 years? I mean, at least YogiOabs is kind of practicing what he preaches. He still wants that virgin wife whilst not being a woman, but But he still wants that virgin wife whilst not being a virgin himself.
And that's quite a challenge to abstain from sex that way. I wonder if there is required some sort of a moral code that would keep people focused on the order.
It's true. People can't have their own moral code. It has to be imposed on them so they can keep their eyes on the order.
That you keep mentioning. You say choose Christians, right? Christianity. And I guess that offers us some form of an order, agreed upon ethics and moral code, which all sounds really good, right? It's good to be ethical and to have moral codes. But why would someone like yourself, you seem so rational, you seem so level-headed, even want to be a Christian, like follow that road?
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning of this, it's a spiritual phenomenon. So I never wanted to be Christian, right? God wants you to be Christian if he chooses you to become Christian. God will want that. You won't want that. What we want isn't necessarily what God wants.
I'm sorry, are we pretending that all Christians are Christian because they came to it on their own instead of being born into it?
A lot of people do want to become Christian, though. They want to learn about it. They want to seek it out. And for those individuals, you seek, you ask, you seek, you knock on doors, and that's how you will find God, and God will speak to you. But yeah, so sorry, what was your question again?
Well, just wondering why someone like yourself, you were an atheist, and like I said, you're a really smart, rational guy.
Is Elliott saying that Christians aren't smart or rational?
It almost seems like those who choose not just a spiritual path, because the New Age is spiritual, quote unquote, but to choose a rigid path, a non-inclusive path, dare I say, patriarchal path like that of Christianity.
Yeah. So why should so yeah, that's a good question.
That is a good question. But when a man chooses a patriarchal lifestyle, it doesn't really surprise me. If a woman chooses it, then yes, I am surprised. But when a man does, I think it speaks a lot as to what type of character he has.
Again, if we look at how things are today, a lot of people are realizing on the left and the right that something is just going too far. I mean, if you watch movies that were made between 2000 and 2010, the behavior is different, the language is different. So over the basically ever since President Obama, I mean, things have gone downhill so much. And then you might start to question, why is it like this? And for me, I found that the explanations in the Bible were the most adequate, most robust in explaining what we call the spiritual war, which is the war between Satan and God. So Satan, for example, you look at just the music industry, what type of trash on Netflix out there in Hollywood.
Oh, so clever.
It's all very satanic in nature. And what that means is it's promoting things that are historically were always considered sinful in nature. So a lot of premarital hookups, drinking, stories of there was some movie just the other day that was really famous. Someone was telling me about to watch. That involves a housewife and she's just cheating on her husband. This is what is promoted, and this is all coming from Satan and the devil.
Oh boy. So just because a song or movie involves something that you disagree with does not make it evil, nor does it mean Satan was involved.
And I just had no idea about this stuff. I thought it was crazy. So a lot of people, I actually knew you were going to ask me this question before we started the call, like days ago or maybe a month ago. So I specifically prepared for this question. So a lot of people think of Christianity as a religion. It's kind of dogmatic. Right. And it really depends which sect you're following. So Roman Catholicism can seem a little more dogmatic in nature. The Amish people, Mennonites, can seem a little more dogmatic in nature. Protestants can seem dogmatic too, but they're supposed to be not so dogmatic. But all of us Christians are dogmatic, and I'm going to be the first to admit it.
Yeah.
So atheists are equally dogmatic, and this is why. It's because I know what atheists think. I know how they think. I know what they have to say. I know where their beliefs and opinions are coming from. And what I hear from atheists all the time is just regurgitated dogma. That's all it is. Right. So we can't really communicate with an atheist as a Christian because the paradigm difference is too much. And guess what? The Bible has evidence of that in Romans. Talks about how people who don't know God, who don't know the ways of God, they're just not going to understand.
I know YogiOabs was an atheist and then he became Christian, but what about Christians who become atheists? Would they be able to understand?
You can give them all the logical and rational arguments they're not going to understand. You could give me all the logical, rational arguments years ago about Christianity, I would never understand. Right. God found me. And spiritually, I understood, because behind the logical mind, behind all this rationality, there's someone's spirit as well. So we have to realize we are not just, the New Age people say this all the time, we're not just, we are spiritual beings. I forget the exact quote, but it's like, we are more than just our body, right? Whereas the modern perspective, I mean, since the Enlightenment, is that the body's a machine. So we can figure out exactly how everything works. There's gears and parts. The spirit doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that. So Christianity is about, first and foremost, it's a relationship with God. It's a relationship with God. There are fundamental doctrines that are just irrefutable about Christianity that come from understanding who God is. And all of that is explained in the Bible.
So last week, I filmed the Paula Morgan and Jesse Lee Peterson video where Jesse was arguing against, using the Bible as a source of God's word. And now here we have YogiOabs talking about how, you can find it all in the Bible. I just really enjoy how Christianity is just, everybody, regardless of their denomination, every individual person has their own interpretation. It's great.
As far as the difference between Mennonite, Amish, Orthodox seems to be pretty popular today. Those individual things don't matter too much as long as the main doctrines are clearly established. And then you can tell someone who is walking with God, like someone who says they're Christian, and they're really no different than an atheist. So I think people should look into Christianity and not sleep on it, because realize that the types of religions percolating in the US coming from Asia, from India, from China, those religions are being practiced in the US in a more modern type of way. Why not look at all religions, look at Christianity as well?
Did he recently see a report about how Americans are becoming less religious or something?
And I think when people are ready for it, when they're ready to wake up and realize their life is terrible, things aren't working out, maybe these crazy Christians, dogmatic Christians are right.
Well, cults do try to get people when they're at their most vulnerable, so thanks for the honesty.
You're going to start reading the Bible, you're going to start opening your mind, and as long as you have that open mind and even a skeptical mind, like a true scientist who pursues the truth, you will find so much evidence in the Bible.
Very cool, man. Thanks for sharing. Your testimony on your YouTube channel is beautiful. It's amazing. And so I would encourage everybody to go and just check it out. Check you out on YouTube. I want to switch for a moment to your Instagram account, because that's really where I kind of began to vibe with your message.
I would love to know how, because last I looked, his Instagram account was private.
And I love the fact that you just put out little quips, just little jabs for people to read and then contemplate. Some of them are pretty triggering, but they all evoke thought. And I think it's fascinating the way you run it. I've got here.
Well, I just checked again, and it's still private, which seems a really weird way to run a business. And for anyone wondering, here's his Instagram bio. I teach women how to behave and carve men into patriarchs. Marriage coach, writer, husband. To follow, read here first. Does he have instructions as to how to follow him? My private Instagram is an intimate place where I share extremely controversial, challenging, and thought-provoking ideas that completely transform marriages and lives, opening hearts and minds. Seems more like closing hearts and minds, but sure. My haters like to misuse my ideas to slander me online, and since they're pretty lazy and dumb, they prefer to stalk my Instagram since they don't have to read too much. So what he's saying is that we should go to his website to, slander him? Then they mass report my posts, and Instagram cries hate speech and deletes my posts and sometimes my account. It only pisses off my haters more when I grow on here and keep it private, but growing here isn't my true goal. He's only accepting followers who he thinks would be his real followers in real life. I don't know, just something about real followers in real life just sounds kind of like he thinks he's Jesus, but anyway. So if you want to follow me, you must be someone interested in learning with humility. You must be someone with a lot of curiosity and genuine interested in changing. And lastly, you need to send me a DM and explain why you'd like to follow. Then I'll accept you. If you don't have a clear profile picture though, or look like you just made an account, I won't accept you here. Wow.
And I went through yesterday and I just screen captured some of my favorites that you've put up there. I would love if I just shared a few of them, and then if you gave your thoughts on, what were your intentions behind the post. How does that sound to you?
And I just want to add right here that I have this impression that YogiOabs is extremely thin-skinned.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So I have one here that says women should speak less and they will be heard more. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so American women are the loudest on the planet, and that's not a traditional behavior, not a traditional attitude. So people who are not in control use excessive language to try to gain control of a situation. And that's women today, right? Because they'll never have control in terms of having complete equality with men. They'll never have that because we're not equal.
Paul and Morgan said we are.
So they use excessive words, and that comes in the form of nagging, complaining, even being demanding. Traditional women find that because they are a woman, right? They're not a man, and they can't compete the way a man can. When you and me are talking, it's different. But when your wife is talking to you, she's going to speak to you differently than when I'm talking to you. If she wants to be heard, if she wants to gain respect.
So Mrs. Midwest did an interview with this guy a while back, and all of a sudden her tips for how to speak to your husband make so much sense.
So women today clamor about, I want respect. I want respect. You need to give me respect for my gender.
What does it mean to demand respect for your gender? And also the fact that you're telling women that if they want respect, they need to shut up means you don't respect women.
That respect can be shown even better when a woman is in her femininity. And so when a woman is in her femininity, she doesn't speak as loudly as a man, isn't bold, isn't as arrogant, isn't as confident.
Oh, I love this. If you do something they don't like, they accuse you of being masculine.
And that's for a very important reason, which is that men are physically stronger than women. So once upon a time, or it's happening today right now in people's homes, is men will hit women, right? And they'll exert power and force and influence over because of their physical superiority.
I'm not really sure where he's trying to go with this, but YogiOabs, that's not a good thing. That's domestic violence. And no matter how feminine and dainty a woman is, that's not going to stop a man, if he wants to, from trying to exert his dominance over her by physically assaulting her.
Now, obviously, that's not something I recommend.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm sure your wife is relieved.
But we have to keep in mind that that is our nature, that men are stronger than women.
And that still doesn't make it okay for a man to assault a woman.
And because of that, women realize that, okay, maybe on other talents rather than being bold and loud in its masculine way to try to exert influence and have feminine power. That actually comes from using fewer words, using more charm, speaking carefully.
AKA resorting to manipulation because anything overt would make a man feel threatened and thus.
And in many cases, being completely silent and only speaking when you need to actually speak. And men are actually more interested in listening to women like that. They want to know what that woman has to say because she's not being so loud and annoying.
All right, well, you heard it here, ladies. If a man's not listening, it's because you're being loud and annoying. And let's be honest, it's not as if what you were going to say is that important anyway, so it's really better to just be silent.
And so it is just something that, unfortunately, it's the way it is between men and women can use it to their advantage to behave in a feminine, classy way. And they find that men will be even more interested in what they have to say.
I have to say that in my experience, you're 100% correct. My wife doesn't say much, so when she does speak, I'm all ears. She definitely gets heard because she's not clamoring.
So now, do men have to be careful as to when they speak, or are they just always supposed to be heard because they're the heads of the household? So whatever they have to say, no matter how mundane it is always going to be important and worth listening to. I feel so sorry for both of their wives.
You have another one here that says, men
That's
care
amazing.
more about a woman's past than women do about a men's. So what does that mean? Men care more about women's past than women do about men's past.
It means that men are terrified of being compared to former lovers.
So the caption probably has to do with, I'm talking about people's sexual pasts.
Oh.
So a lot of feminist Christian women who follow me online or find me online, they say, well, if men want virgins, that virgin woman should have a virgin man. And they kind of do it like that. That's exactly how I envision them writing their comments online. So here's the thing. Yeah. And the eyes bulging out like this. So here's the thing is, if we look at both atheist women, Hindu women, basically anyone that's not Christian, which technically are pagans, and Christian women, versus if we look at Christian men versus non-Christian men, okay? So non-Christian women don't like virgins.
Non-Christian woman jumping in here to say that I like virgins just fine, and how on earth is YogiOabs, a Christian man, going to speak for me, a non-Christian woman?
All I need to say is look at the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin. That says everything you need to know about how secular society views men who decline to participate in hookup culture, or they fail to do so, which people call themselves incels.
So I do think society is wrong when it says that men should be going out and getting laid every night, and if they do, they're studs, and if they don't, they're losers, and something is wrong with them. However, I also think society is wrong when it says that women who go out and get laid every night are whores who have been used up, and that women who don't are innocent, pure angels.
But when we look at Christian men and non-Christian men, both, when it comes to marriage, will have a preference, from my experience, with preference for a virgin wife, even though they might be happy to sleep with the whores around town.
Right.
But when it comes to marriage, they have a very different standard.
And if they have a standard that their wife must be a virgin whilst not holding that same standard for themselves, they are hypocrites.
And so I was just saying, hey, look, this is what I've noticed. Men actually care more about a woman's past. It's great that virgin Christian women care about men's past too, and want everyone to be righteous, because that is obviously what we're advocating for. We're all advocating for, but we're just pointing out the fact that we have a very different nature.
I agree. Another one you have here says, denying your spouse sexually is reverse rape. What does that mean?
And this man has the nerve to play dumb about how people slander him online using his own words.
Yeah, so this was something I thought of because rape is considered an act of non-consensual sex.
Right.
So in the Bible, it actually says, people have slightly different interpretations of this, but it says you only need consent to not have sex. You don't need consent to have sex between a husband and wife.
YogiOabs wants people to look into Christianity, and I would say this right here is an excellent reason not to do so. What sort of backwards bullshit is this?
Because that's considered a conjugal right, but you do need consent to not have sex. Okay, so it's a little bit tricky here. So I hope everyone pays attention. So if you deny your spouse sex, it's basically non-consensually denying them sex. So non-consensually having sex is rape. Non-consensually denying sex is what I said, is denying your partner sex. So it's kind of like the opposite of rape in a way, because they're both non-consensual acts, but they're opposite acts.
Just masturbate.
It's interesting that you say this, because it goes so counterculture to think that when you marry someone, you owe them your body, you owe them your sex, where in many relationships, the woman remains a gatekeeper, and the man bought something that he can't get.
The man bought something? What did he buy exactly? A woman's body? The right to have sex whenever he wants? So YogiOabs went on earlier about how, relationships nowadays are so shallow, and he wanted to build a deeper, meaningful connection. But apparently it always comes right down to sex. The sex the woman had before she had the misfortune to meet this man, the sex they have afterwards. It all just apparently comes back to sex, despite the bullshit he was spewing earlier about how he wanted something meaningful. I feel so sorry for both of their wives right now.
And it's unfair.
My heart weeps for you.
You go on for another one. Let's do one more here, because I know that we're short on time. You said self-love is an oxymoron and is more aptly termed self-destruction.
Absolutely. So yeah, I've got a little more time. If we had a few more posts, I think we'd be able to get through them. But so I've been thinking about this a lot, because you see in modern Western women, in America especially, all this self-love stuff. You see them on Christian women as well. Now, the Bible does say that we should treat others how you want to be treated. It says, love your wife like you love yourself. So I do think we can apply love towards ourselves, but generally love it requires two, at least more than one object. So you can't really love yourself, in my opinion. I think it's an oxymoron, because love is an action to be directed at something else. I don't really know how I can love myself, like what that means.
Well, maybe it's difficult for you because you don't actually know what love in general means. However, if it helps, think of self-love as self-respect.
Do I go in my bedroom and hug myself and write amazing things about myself? Like, oh, I am so talented. This and that. I mean, that's how modern women are doing self-love, applying this concept of self-love. Oh, I'm an amazing queen, babe.
You don't know anything about women. Shut up.
And that is really strange. I just think that's really strange, because I think love is really about giving. It's a selfless act, and self-love is the most selfish thing that's out there. And I think there's other ways of accomplishing what self-love tries to accomplish without calling it self-love. And I think it has just been taken way too far. So these people who take it too far are actually destroying themselves, because self-love for women basically means masturbation. It means I'm a goddess, I'm a queen. And it turns you into kind of a narcissist.
That's rich, coming from the man who thinks denial of sex is just like rape. And also, Elliott, if your wife wants to have sex and you say no because you're not in the mood for whatever reason, is that being the gatekeeper to sex?
At least for a lot of women it does, but there's plenty of male narcissists too who do these things. But typically for women, they need more validation in life in general. And so self-love is very appealing to modern women, because it makes them feel whole. It makes them feel like they're valued. And that's because they're not getting married or having kids. So they have to invent this self-love thing in order to replace marriage and family.
And it surprises no one to learn that YogiOabs is full of shit.
So it's really destroying them, because the more you love yourself, the harder it is to actually genuinely connect with another person, which is the opposite of what everyone else will say.
No. Self-love means having self-respect. For example, you get married, and after your honeymoon, your new husband says, oh, by the way, you need my consent to not have sex with me. any self-respecting woman would say, oh, all right, we're going to get an annulment. And that is why these men keep trying to push marriage on women that are 18 to 23 because they know the younger a woman is, the less self-respect she has. And thus, the more likely she is to go along with whatever bullshit they come up with.
Everyone else will say, the more you love yourself, the more love you have to give to everyone. I simply have not ever seen evidence of that. I think we are meant to be unique individuals. You find someone you're compatible with, the love just kind of happens. I don't think there's something special you have to do, like love yourself and masturbate and think about how great you are and love yourself, and then you can give that love to someone else. I just don't believe that. So yeah.
Very cool, man. Well, thank you.
So I'm seeing a lot of similarities between YogiOabs and the transformed wife, and I just want to note that I think when YogiOabs says men want this, he's actually talking about what he wants. He wants a virgin wife, therefore men want a virgin wife. I don't think it's that he wants to go back to the 1950s. I think he actually wants to go back to biblical times, where if a woman wasn't a provable virgin, like blood on the bed sheets, she was either killed or driven back to her father in shame so that he could marry again. I did a little reading of the comments on this video, and I thought I would include a few because I think it sheds a really interesting light on the way these men view women.
One of the few times where you win, even if you strike out by not finding one. Being alone with peace and purpose beats having a woman and family not under your control as head of the house. No matter how much they claim to want equal partnerships, the Most High holds the man responsible. I don't know if they do. From what I see here in Poland, a supposedly traditional Catholic country, most men don't seem to require a woman to be a virgin for them to enter a committed relationship with her. If men started to request purity and or chastity from women, there will be a sudden increase in virtue from women. Obviously this ain't happening anytime soon, as desperate men will let women whore around simply because they think it increases the chances of them getting some. There is no real turning back at this point. I'd like to add, it's not just about finding a virgin. If you can find a woman with a low notch count, that's good enough. Many women that are relationship type women that have had sex. It's just important to know if you can guide them or not, if they're quality women. They may have been guided by the toxic mainstream narrative for years. But ask them questions, get them talking, see what their character is about. Younger women are generally more pure and can be guided. Anything sub 5 dudes probably isn't too bad. Go for younger women, higher percentage they won't have an extreme amount of baggage, like 20 to 22. Yes, men naturally want virgins, but look at it on a level beyond the sexual. I think it's largely because men want someone to belong to them. Even deeper, it's because the feminine spirit was meant to conform to and follow the masculine lead. The more of a blank slate she is, the more feminine she essentially is. A man is to fill himself up and then pour himself into her, so the more empty she is, the more he can fill. Further, a man seeks to perpetuate his seed and his legacy through a woman. Therefore, the more teachable she is, and the less competing men's DNA and influence on her, the purer his legacy and his seed will be passed on. The more pure, teachable, and responsive she is, the more he can trust her with everything he has earned and worked for. Remember, a man is to build an empire, and she is handed it without having to work to earn it. She is simply chosen, but chosen for purity and femininity, but so that she is trustworthy to a man.
I think it's the last comment that disturbs me the most because, well, the more of a blank slate she is, I mean, they essentially do want a blank slate so the man can project whatever it is he wants on her. They don't want someone with her own personality, her own dreams, her own goals. I mean, like Elliott himself said in one of his TikToks, why would a woman want more than to follow a man? Why would she want her own goals? And I think that's also where a lot of the comments that I get that seem shocked that a woman wouldn't care about not being married because they can't conceive of an idea of a woman not existing to please a man. And I finished the video and I'm about to go edit, but I also want to add that of course they can't conceive of that because judging from this, the man is also supposed to give the woman her personality. So of course, they're really confused when a woman rejects the whole notion of marriage and want to have his children and help build his legacy, which I find it very interesting. That she is simply chosen because having children, how is she's not simply handed children. She has to gestate them and then give birth to them, which is dangerous, not to mention painful. And also, most men don't have an empire, unless by an empire you mean like a house, in which case a lot of people have houses, not just men, and nowadays most women also, give money toward the empire. Usually it's more of a partnership where they're both putting money in said partnership. About to edit me jumping in again to ask, how big of an ego does this man have to think that he has an empire? What is your empire? You're not a king. You're not going to pass a title down to your offspring. I mean, yes, be proud of what you have, But don't try to act as though you're some sort of royalty. Your DNA is not special, and marriage is not a special favor you do to a woman to give her life meaning and purpose. But yeah, this one just, the more of a blank, I just can't get over the blank slate part. But it just makes a whole lot of sense. So thanks, D. Bradley. This makes a whole lot of sense and I can't even speak anymore. When put to the things that men have said to me when they find my channel, and I'm pretty sure they don't actually watch the video, they see the word feminist and just make all sorts of crazy assumptions. But anyway, they see this and are just like, what? A woman that's not married and she's like okay with it? It just goes against everything we've been taught. Chosen for purity. And also the men's DNA. What? Even if a woman somehow managed to sleep with 1 million men, your offspring would not have any of their DNA. That is not how human bodies work. Take a deep breath. Look at Ellie. I can't believe she has slept so long. There was a food break at some point in here, but still sleeping. All right, so time for my quick spiel. Please like and subscribe if you would care to do so. Please also feel free to leave a comment below letting me know what you thought of this very interesting video and if you think I should do a separate video on YogiOabs alone. I am Feminist Cat Lady Spinster on Instagram and Spinster Kit on Twitter. Please feel free to follow me there, at least until I can get a community tab, which according to Social Blade should be sometime in April. Counting down to 1,000 subscribers. Woo! Anyway, yeah. I will see you all in the next video, and I hope you have a good day.